Welcome everybody to this special workshop. I'm not sure if John Downs was coming or not, but we got a full group up on our Zoom, and we got a handful here in the audience. This is a special workshop is in regards to discussion of bond issuance for Sportsplex, but there's another little issue that I wanted to talk about prior. If I can find it here, is this MOU, Lou? Yes. I wanted to talk about that because
the town cannot execute an MOU prior to its decision to fund the project. I received the legal counsel or counsel's advice from them.
yeah, let me find it here. I just had it here in front of me. Oh, there it is. So where I was really confused at with this is who drew up the MOU? What is
McGuire Woods prepared it.
Is McGuire Woods online by any chance?
No, McGuire Woods. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. It's Ray Jackson. McGuire Woods is our counsel, and they are the ones that drafted the MOU.
Hey Ray, can you tell us exactly what the purpose of this MOU in regards to the sideline and the developer in the town of Elkton in regards to the special taxing district? I think we all need to wrap our arms around a little bit better.
I can, and then I would ask Chris Sheehan probably to add color to it. But the long story short is, we're in the process of finalizing our special tax district that initially contemplated sideline properties being the owner of the property and participating in the special tax district. A municipality cannot pay into the special tax district. Chris will clarify that. So in the event that the town does purchase the property and facilitates the development of the property, we would have to have a side agreement with regards to the payment of the special tax district.
And Mr. Mayor, if you may, this is Chris Sheehan. Good morning, everybody. Let me just add that one of the reasons for the purpose of the MOU is the amount of public disclosure that is out there with respect to the contemplation of the town potentially constructing and owning the asset, the sports park asset. And the reason that it's important that we have some type of disclosure is that investors will potentially be very spooked, given that there is a substantial amount of public information, and we're just trying to provide disclosure to them for the special taxing district bonds. In the event of once we're at the point where we can market and sell those bonds, so that there's some assurances to them that they're not going to have a sizable revenue stream extinguished for the repayment of those bonds. So it's really more to just provide some disclosure to the potential universe of bond buyers for raised bonds, to give them some comfort that we are thinking through this, and we recognize that if the town was to go forward and was to issue bonds, that they would not be impaired in any way.
Well, I think that was the challenge that I think that I was having with the MOU was that, there's been some discussion between me and I would say Sidelines and Stonewall, and there's been some discussion between myself and some of the board members, but there was really never any discussion that we were going to move forward or not move forward. And I thought that this was kind of like putting the cart before the horse a little bit, this MOU, before we had this meeting here today. But I would also say, after you're telling me that, if even the discussion of this probably leads that the investors in the bonds, it's something that they should know that could happen. Is that what you're saying to me?
That's correct, Mayor. This is this really has nothing to do with the sports park at all, and really is not anything binding by the town to do anything related to the sports park. This is really just to address, some of the public narrative that sits out there about the town potentially exploring, the sports park financing, and that's so that we don't affect the investors looking to buy the special taxing district bonds for the Southfields project. It's really just some upfront narrative we're trying to provide to them as they, as they do Google searches and they look through past meeting minutes, once we're marketing the bonds, and we just don't want to make sure they're not spooked by thinking that, the town may, has been talking about this project, may undertake this project, and as a result of that, would, in that event, extinguish, that liability, which would affect the special taxing district bond. So I would just, kind of reiterate that this has nothing to do with the sports park. It does not obligate the town to do anything related to the sports park. It's really just to address the fact that there have been public discussions about the sports park, and we want to make sure that it doesn't affect the ability to market and sell the special taxing district bonds if and when we're ready to do so.
Thank you, Chris. Lou, who's representing us on this? Is that Jennifer or Kimberly?
The board has to keep in mind that because of disclosure by Misero, they have no fiduciary responsibility to the town. They're not looking out for our financial interests.
That's correct.
Consequently, Davenport and counsel, Kimberly Mend with Whiteford Law, would be the consultants the board should utilize in making decisions here, because there are very a lot of gravity involved.
And that's correct. And that's what I want to ask Kimberly or Jennifer. Hi, Kim. How are you?
Good. Hi, everybody. Good morning.
How do you feel about this MOU at this point? You've had a chance to review it. Can you give us some advice? Tell us what you're feeling.
Sure. And, just to be clear, the Davenport folks are here from like a financial advisory perspective. I can give you the legal perspective here. As Chris Sheehan does say, this agreement doesn't necessarily obligate the town to pay the taxes unless the town purchases the property. And, we have, and Davenport can get into the financial side of this. If the town does proceed to purchase the property from Sideline, it will be, according to this MOU, it will be responsible for paying those taxes. So that is, I would say, an additional financial obligation that would be incurred should the town purchase the property and proceed with that portion of the transaction. What I'm not necessarily able to advise on at this point, because we're still waiting to see what the disclosure document looks like for the special tax districts bonds, is, whether and to what extent the special tax transaction is dependent upon the development of the sportsplex, what they're describing is the plan to develop the sportsplex, and whether that narrative will be including the town's involvement in that sportsplex. And depending on what that, narrative is, and I can touch on Chris's point about addressing a question for the bondholders, which this does, but if the narrative does include the town's involvement in the development of the sportsplex, then the natural, I guess, assumption that the market could make is that the town will be responsible for these special taxes for this property. So from a legal perspective, that's the position the town, is and could be in, depending on how, at what point in the transaction in the process, the special tax bonds are being marketed, so that if they are indeed saying that the town is going to be involved in owning and developing and financing the sportsplex, which I'm not sure if the special tax bonds are sort of contingent and dependent upon that happening, then this would obligate the town to pay those taxes if it elects to proceed, with that structure. And so while they are two different and distinct transactions, there's a connectivity that will be created by this MOU. And so I don't know if after Davenport kind of puts in theirs, whether, Chris can describe to the group, what the connectivity is, vis-a-vis the two transactions. Joe and Jennifer, do you have anything to add on the financial side of this? Joe, you're on mute.
Start, yeah. And then Joe, you can jump in if you want. In terms of the MOU, as Ms. Min mentioned, if the property is conveyed to the town, at that point, you all would be responsible for the special taxes on the sports park property, whether the sports park went through or not. About 10 minutes before the call, we did receive an estimate from UniCap of what the maximum special taxes would be over the 30-year period. And that ranges from about just over 166,000 to up to about just under $300,000 that the town would need to pay if the land was conveyed to them. That is the maximum amount, that could potentially, be lower than that, but UniCap provided the maximum for each of the 30-year period. And that's sort of the variance between the 167 and just under 300,000 that the town would be responsible for if you and took the land was conveyed to you all.
Jennifer, is that per year or is that for the life?
Over the life, it's the maximum special taxes is about 6.8 million, just under $6.8 million. So each year there's a specific amount that they've calculated in the amount of special taxes. But if you look at the maximum over the 30-year period, it comes out to just under 6.8 million.
Thank you.
Jennifer, what about debt service on the bonds?
Now, if you all move forward with the sports park and pledge your GO to, I know, the 40 million has been, has been projected as the cost for that project. Talking to our fixed income desk and looking at market rates as of last week, we would expect that debt service would be about $3 million a year once the capitalized interest period is over. So if you look at the debt service that we've estimated plus the maximum special taxes, if you were to pay everything, if the sports park was not, self-supporting, then the fact that you would pledge your GO, you would need to be prepared to raise your property taxes to pay that debt service and the special taxes on that. So you're looking at about 3.3 million maximum. That being said, I know that there was, a market study done about the sports complex and, there were numbers run in terms of revenues to be generated from that sports complex. But I think the point is, yes, there might be revenues generated by that. And yes, they could potentially, pay for the debt service on the bonds, but there's also the chance that it doesn't, at any sort of period over that 30 years. And so if the town were to pledge your GO, you would need to be prepared to pay for that debt service if those revenues were not sufficient. And so knowing that maximum of, the 3.2 or 3.3 that we're estimating now is sort of just what to keep in mind. And Joe, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Have you calculated the real property taxes that the town would have to pay on this property in the event that it was leased to a for-profit company, because we would no longer be exempt?
The real property, no, we have not calculated. So that might be something in addition to the 3.2 and 3.3 that we've estimated for debt service and the special taxes.
Joe, did you have anything to add?
I think Jennifer covered it covered it well in terms of a broad overview. I mean, we can get into the policy discussion at some point when you're ready to do that. But in terms of the facts of the matter, she's got it covered.
Yeah, I think it's good to get this information out. This is probably the part of the meeting that was probably the most important to get some of the facts out on the table. Now, I also want to I'm going to introduce Sideline Sports to come up and talk to us as a group, because quite frankly, I think we're speculating on all these numbers, and we haven't even sat down to discuss what we may or may not be able to do or can't do. So Mike and Brad, if you guys could come up, and I'd like to ask you, what is the thinking here? I mean, we're speculating that the town's going to own a ballpark here, and we're going to be $3.3 million a year covering this debt service, and we forgot all about a feasibility study that's with you not bringing in $1, of course. But listen, I'd like to tell us what your thoughts are, because I think, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Why is the sportsplex in the special tax?
It was included in the resolution. Properties.
I thought the special taxing district was for the residential or commercial development that actually pays.
All the properties are.
All the
All the property. The only property that was excluded was parcel I, where the enterprise zone, where the Trumbull Pro building is. That was excluded. That area. Everything else is in the special taxing district that was established by a resolution of this board.
I got that, but I guess how does that work?
They have to pay by acre or square footage for the sports park by the number of acres. They have roughly 45 to 50 acres out there, depending on how they develop.
Versus, okay.
And then the rest pay by lots or whatever. That's how it's set up.
It was set up by
That's true. It's set up not by acres and by square foot, but by impact. So they look at the traffic that we produce versus the traffic that's produced by the homes, the traffic study that was phased in, and all of those things are applied to basically decide what impact we pay for the special tax district versus the other
Versus normal tax.
Versus the lots that the homes, for instance, the R board, and Ray, you can certainly chime in if you'd like about that. You probably.
Yeah. So I thank you very much, Mike, for clarifying it. What I would say is that we had to look at this globally as a whole. And as Mike said, you've got, let's just say for simplistic sakes, 800 residential units. Well, you can easily proportionally divide the number of units and get a proportional share of what their responsibility is. But with regards to the sports complex, it's primarily based on traffic, as Mike just said. So when we did our traffic study, Lenhart Traffic Design came back and said, well, you need to make improvements to Route 40 and 213. You need to make additional improvements to Route 213, ingress and egress onto the boulevard, because of the amount of traffic that the sports complex will dictate. I think, and pardon my ignorance, but I think those numbers are $4 or $5 million in state highway improvements. So all of that is considered in this global infrastructure improvements. We've got the boulevard, we've got a water tower, we've got sewer pump stations, and all of those infrastructure projects are utilized by the sports complex. It's a little different. It's not, you can't do it proportionally by unit. And Lewis is right. In this case, we did it by acreage.
Okay. All right. So you're obligated.
We're obligated.
For that.
Yep.
Okay.
We are. And thanks for getting the worst part of the meeting out of the way first.
All right. Thank you, Ray.
In here. I think 100% right. I don't think that the intent, when we say that the town would be owning the sports park, this is a part of a public-private partnership It's not a requirement by us or an intent by us to sell the property necessarily to the town, but it's a part of how these are put together. We actually hired Ballard Spar, a firm out of Philadelphia, who is one of the nation's experts on putting these together. This is not something new. This is something that they do all over the country. The intent is to legally fund the project using bond funds in such a way that allows the town to both fund it and protect itself, and at the same time, at the end payment of those bonds, have that turned back over to Sideline Sports to then continue running it and pay taxes and to continue to support the town and all the activities that it had over the life of that bond. The intent of this, as you guys know, when we had the feasibility study done, was really to prove that this could sustain itself. It wasn't to say whether or not the town would have to fund it. The idea of funding it with a public-private partnership is something we've been talking about for several months. To your point, Mr. Mayor, we have not decided whether that would be a total fund, whether that would be a partial fund. For instance, we know that there are options for us. You know, while we've come up with what we believe is a world-class sporting venue that would support the residents, the town, and the economic impact of what we would see. The reality is, if it performs the way we expect it to perform in the first 5 years, the town would then receive back its money in one way or another. In other words, either from our bond repayments, of which every dollar made is going to go back to repaying the bonds until it's completely paid back, or in the direct and indirect spending from the 250,000 people that are going to come here to Elkton, and the 45,000 hotel rooms that are expected to be rented as a result of it. So I think there's a combination of things. It's easy to say that you're going and getting a loan and then you're paying it back one day at a time. But the reality is that there's a much bigger picture here of what we've been discussing over the past several months, whether it's local impact for the citizens, whether it's the economic impact for the town and the county, the additional indirect revenue that's going to be collected, or it is having a national sports park here that's going to bring in colleges and sports teams from around the country to Elkton. So I think it is a bit nearsighted to say, for instance, we're not building a county park. We're not building a town park. We're not building something that was just going to be used by the citizens. This is going to be an economic driver that's going to change the face of Elkton. The feasibility study, while it does show that it will repay the bond, I personally feel it's too conservative, and I feel that Brad and I could outperform that feasibility study with our eyes closed. And I've shared that with SFC when they completed this report. I think it's extremely conservative for good reason, because they want to make sure that it's repayable, and they're protecting your interests by doing that. So they go as conservative as they can when they do this study. And to be quite honest with you, I think it is overly conservative. So that as we continue this discussion, and we say the full faith and property taxes being raised, that would assume that the entire project fell flat on its face and you had to replace every dollar and nothing ever happened on that piece of property. That's not reality. That's just not reality. So I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I wouldn't have risked my livelihood to get to this point if we were planning on doing that. Our intent is to run this as a business, as a profitable business that will bring 250,000 people to the town of Elkton.
How do you see this thing working?
I think that there's two parts to this project, and I don't want to. So we have the sports complex and we have the building in the center. The building in the center, while it does, it is what I believe an anchor for this project. It is something that Brad and I have talked about, that we may need to find out what the town's ability or what their exposure limit is and where you'd like to be, and then we work back from that. We recognize that the most important part is protecting what we have here as an investment in the town, so that we can make the biggest impact to the citizens. Meaning, specifically, if we give this out to someone else, then we don't get to decide who gets to play on the fields. We don't get to have any impact for the local community, for the kids that want to play here, that play travel sports, right? So the more control we have over it, the better we are. That was my whole intent when we started this entire project. However, there are parts of this that don't have anything to do with that part of it. So the building in the center, for instance, may be something that we look at pulling out of this project and we fund that from a different source. My point is that this meeting was supposed to be a discussion about how to get it done, not a list of things and reasons not to do it. It'd be great.
And no, listen, we're there with you
Okay,
right now.
I feel it.
You know, you may not feel that way, but listen, I had to talk about the MOU and then it got into a little bit of what our dire costs were going to be at the end. But I do believe that that's important for us all to recognize that 3.3 million is a number. If there is $0 ever coming in from this facility, there is zero direct dollars or zero indirect dollars. And I think that's important to know. And I also know that your cost of the special tax district, which is anywhere from 166,000 to 300,000. And I would say to you, if we're moving forward, would you say that you would pay that as a pilot, right?
Of course.
Of course you're going to pay.
We have to.
And I would also say that in this feasibility study and as you're moving forward, you would be paying the $3.2 million every year, the debt service for the town. Is that correct in saying
That's
that?
also the point.
That is correct. And I think that we all recognize that. So I'm asking next, is your council on to tell us how that they see that this could be put together?
Yes, and I believe we have a representative from Ballard Spar on line.
We have anyone from Ballard Spar online?
Mike, do you have their name?
I don't have.
Bill Estes.
Yes, hi, Bill Estes from Ballard Spar. I was asked to be on this. I'm just a little familiar with the project, but I am not prepared to speak today on the project.
Okay, that's fine. Is the so Mike, how do you see it?
No, so John Smolin, who was our direct counsel on this, was not available today. And I know he had Bill, he asked Bill to jump in. I thought he'd be a little more prepared to speak, so I apologize for that. To be candid, a qualified management agreement is a document that's put together that basically outlines the entire agreement between the town and us and the bonds, the repayment of the bonds. It describes how you would take ownership of the bonds, how we would take care of the special tax if you're going to pilot, what happens at the end of that agreement and how that turns back over to us, what happens in default, what happens if it doesn't pay the entire amount, who pays what. And I think that is the document that we would have to decide to move forward on to discuss exactly what those terms would be. And I think that if the town decides that they are in for this project and understand that you're not purchasing the project with your funds as they sit today. The idea is that you're purchasing the project with the bond that we're repaying. So we're not asking you to go and purchase the property out of your coffers. We're basically saying the bond that we pull will have to pay, will be used to both purchase the property so you can protect yourself, fund the property, and then subsequently we would pay that entire bond back. And at the time it was paid back, you would have no more risk, which time it would turn back to us in ownership. We've gone so far as to meet with Medco, a company for the state of Maryland that can even help us with it as a procurement vehicle. They can help us with the bonds. I know that Rob, you and I talked about that for a period of time. I don't know if you want to get into that.
Well, I do. I want to bring that up. Is there anyone from Medco online by any chance?
Mayor, this is Kimberly Min. I don't believe I see them online, but I have done several transactions on a conduit basis with Medco, including with the benefits that they've described. So I should be able to answer some of those questions,
Good. So yeah, I thank you, Kimberly. So last week I was on a conference call with Mike Brown, and we spoke to Medco. Medco, Kimberly, tell me what it stands for.
MEDCO stands for the Maryland Economic Development Corporation. They are a state public instrumentality. Their general mission is that they act as a conduit or a facilitator for projects that are either public-private partnerships or public-public partnerships throughout the state. They have a tax-exempt status, meaning that if bonds are issued, and they have the power to issue bonds, so if they do issue bonds, typically they do so with another obligated party, meaning that Medco is not directly responsible for the repayment of the bonds. They do it as a facilitator, and then they also have the ability to pass through, so to speak, sales tax exemptions based, for materials and procurement costs. And they're also not subject to procurement. So as an owner, they act as a facilitating owner, they don't have to go through the same procurement processes that a lot of the state institutions have to do. So they do, I've worked with them on, an example is like a student housing facility where for a university, they will be the owner and help with the development and the construction, and facilitating the production of a facility. The facility's revenues are what are dedicated to the repayment of the bonds, and those bonds can get publicly marketed by Medco just like any other issuer. And so the structure mimics as if the town were to issue the bonds itself. And then I think, what we're hearing is, there would be, whether the town issued its bonds itself or whether the bonds were issued through Medco, the town would have a contributing element to its responsibility for the repayment of the bonds, which will be dependent on the operations and the production of revenues from the particular facility. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. So it was one of the questions that came up during the conversation, why it was important to use an entity like Medco was that if the procurement came from the town of Elkton, our procurement would be, okay, now we're going to go out and get 3 bids on this, 3 bids on that, 3 bids on this. And they can, I'm not saying they're bypassing the procurement process, but they can do it much faster than what we can as a municipality. I spoke to the comptroller on Friday at the Elkton Alliance event, and she thought she's worked with Medco through her life as a delegate and now as her life to a comptroller. And if we decide to move in this direction, I would highly recommend that would be the arm that we use, because they've done this. This is what they do. And so I guess it sounds like what we need to do is get some type of a working document from your side so that we could review this, so that we could get council to review it, so we could understand exactly what's in, what's out on this.
Yep.
Because if you were to remove the spine per se of that structure, this brings this project cost down considerably.
True. Very true.
Right?
Yep.
And not that really matters to me.
Right.
What I want to say, if we're going to do this, it has to be a first class Disney-esque, the best in the world. I don't think anyone has always heard me say we want to have the largest indoor-outdoor recreation facility in North America. Well, I think everyone recognizes how I feel about this project. I mean, sometimes I may go with the blinkers on my eyes, but I think my eyes are wide open and I got very good vision on both sides with this, and I know what it's going to bring to our community. But I've done enough talking. Is there specific questions that you guys need to ask or bring to the table here? Because I'm ready to ask these guys to bring that documentation to us so we can get council to review it and see where we stand. We know what the bottom line costs are. That's if it brings in $0. Are you guys willing to commit? I mean, when you'll be committing personally, there's a lot of things that you guys are going to be signing on when you get to this point. And
it's expected and it's nothing.
It's nothing.
I think it's also, when you think about what we've done so far, right? So Mike and I, over the last several years, have already invested $1 million, right? So there's a lot of that has been done. And I think the purpose that I saw this meeting being is for you guys to say that, like, hey, we're committed to move forward, so we can then engage, our attorney Ballard Spar to draft a document and move forward, and that there's costs that we're going to absorb until we get to the bond. So I think that from our perspective, we're ready to move forward and work with the town and your staff and your council with our council to move it forward, and we'd like to do that immediately.
So I guess it would be a question for our council, Kimberly or Jennifer, I guess I would ask, how do we move forward with getting our bond rating?
Well, I think first, we would need to scope out what the financial, what the deal actually looks like. I know we've talked about this management agreement. But I think that, we need to understand the structure of what this deal is really going to look like before that, and have the town understand what their financial implications are and whatever that end number might be, that we're shooting for, and be comfortable with going to the rating agencies at that point and understand the financial implications and, whether you can afford it or not. If for some reason, not to say that it wouldn't generate revenues, but as I said at the beginning, if you pledge your GO, you do have to be prepared to pay the taxes if for some reason it doesn't. So I think there are a few steps that need to be completed, before we approach the rating agencies.
Yeah, this is Joe from Davenport. I would agree with what Jennifer said. I mean, we need to know who's responsible for what, that agreement, that qualified management agreement or development agreement, or, some combination of legal documentation that Ballard Spar would prepare and Kimberly would review, is critical. Because the rating agencies, the reason we sort of sketched out what the maximum exposure on an annual basis to the town would be is because that's frankly how the rating agencies are going to look at it. They're going to assume that this project, and I mean no disrespect or criticism of our friends that want to develop this, but the rating agencies are going to assume that the project is not going to work, that it's going to fail, and that the town is going to be on the hook for all of the costs. And so we need to know what that exposure is, and we need to fit that exposure within the town's overall financial profile. And, we need to understand what the potential ramifications of that are from a tax perspective, from a debt profile perspective. That's going to drive the initial rating. The rating is based on four fundamental factors: the amount of debt the town has outstanding and is projected to have in the near future, the economic fundamentals of the town and surrounding Cecil County, the town's finances, both historical and projected going forward, and the town's overall management acumen. In other words, do you have financial policies that you adhere to, and so forth and so on. And this $40 million project has to be fit within that sort of four-factored profile, and understood before we can go and get a rating. So we're sort of asking the development team to put something on the table, so that we understand what the town's responsibilities are versus their responsibilities. So the first question I would ask is there going to be any equity, private equity in the project, or is the town expected to, from the proceeds of a bond issue, fund whatever is decided the full project is, whether it includes that central building or not? It seems to me that the central building, given the other rental opportunities and usage opportunities, would be a very nice thing to have as part of the project. So it's not wholly reliant on seasonal sports activity. There are other potential uses, shoulder season type uses, that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit. I apologize, but that's how we get to the rating agencies.
Very good.
Joe,
Yeah.
Joe, since the maximum obligation is going to be 3.2, 3.3, while we're working on the agreement, could you work with the town to put that together, what you just described? Can that fit within their financial picture? And what does that look like at the maximum cost? So once we get and we'll work on the qualified, the agreement or whatever that document looks like to show what the structure will be, but then we'll know kind of, we can do those simultaneously to kind of work together. If we know it's 3.2, what does that look like for the town? Does that make sense?
Yes, we in fact are working with the town as we speak. I think we've got a data request into Mr. George and his staff in terms of getting some information. We're doing what we call a comprehensive financial review and just sort of looking at the town both granularly and from a big picture point of view, with the eye towards that being an initial comprehensive review that would facilitate a credit presentation and so forth. And as part of that, we will of course look at this particular proposed borrowing and look at the town, both its current status and if in a hypothetical scenario would borrow the full 40, and maybe we'll even do a couple of different scenarios along the way that contemplate different amounts, something less than 40 million, so that they have a pretty good 30,000 foot view of what the property tax implications would be, and so forth, if they were to have to step up and make all these payments. I mean, we, like you, are confident that there's going to be significant revenue generated from this facility. The question becomes, is the revenue significant enough that it can pay all of the operating costs of the facility and then pay the full amount of debt service on top of that? And that, time will tell in that regard. But the town will be prepared to understand what the financial implications are at various levels of revenue production at the facility. Net revenue production, net of operating expenses.
Well, we appreciate that.
So this is Kimberly. Has there been a term sheet that's been kind of introduced, beyond discussions as to, what the structure of the transaction might look like in a P3 structure? I mean, beyond, like what the terms of the management agreement would be, how the fees would work, how the how the construction development would work, stuff like that, and including whether there's intended to be any equity.
Hey, Kimberly, this is Chris. Why don't I take a stab at creating something and circulate it to this group so that everyone has a sense of what the structure could look like, and we can then let everyone react appropriately and start fine tuning it. But why don't I take that as a to-do?
That would be great, because I think that'll help us answer a lot of the abstract, right? Which and further the town to the ability to, consider and make these kinds of deliberations.
Well, I think you're right, Kimberly. I think that's where we wanted to get at today is moving forward with the document. But do we have anyone from the county on the Zoom meeting today? Maybe not.
No, Mayor.
Mayor, this is Sean McCollum, Finance Director. I'm on the call.
Hey, Sean, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Doing good. I'm glad you're on here because I was going to ask a kind of a question to our council. If the county was to help the town of Elkton support this project, could we fall on the county's bond rating? And Sean, I'm not really asking you that. I'm asking council how that would work. And maybe you could. Is that something that could work? Chris, Kimberly, Jennifer?
Yeah, so I'll let Jennifer and Joe get into more details of how the rating agencies would look on that, but it really is dependent on what the parties' relative obligations are as to the economics themselves. So whatever, the county would offer could be considered, but I'm not sure that it would be, a sort of net for net same as the county rating, or whether there would be, a broader level of considerations to take into account. Because as everybody knows, the better the rating, the better the rate. So I appreciate that. So, Sean, thanks for coming. I think that was the
I'd like to get with you as we move forward on this because I'd love for the county to join in with the town of Elkton on this project because I think it's a win for all of us.
Yeah, Mayor, that sounds great. I mean, I heard about this about a few days ago, so I am new to the project and still trying to get the facts as to what it is, just like you're all trying to put it together. But absolutely, I'd love to hear more and any way we can help. Absolutely, we'll be there to help.
Appreciate you, man. Okay, anyone from the board? Is the board okay if we move forward with getting the documentation, the agreements together? Let's take a look at it, then we can dive into this thing. We'll have a unfiltered look at what kind of the ask is and how this thing is going together.
We have to.
We have
So,
to. Absolutely.
This is Kimberly. I just want to kind of make sure that we come away with an understanding of really the two pieces here that are in front of the town. The first is that it sounds like we'll get a term sheet on, which is the Sportsplex itself. To be clear, the MOU is related to the special tax district. The component of the special tax district transaction that it is intended to address is regardless of, I guess, how the Sportsplex ends up being structured. The MOU states if the town were to acquire the property, the town would be responsible for the special taxes of that site. And so, it is, as we said, a contingent agreement. There are implications associated with the agreement, which I think would need to be addressed fully in disclosure, such as the town is not making any commitment to do the Sportsplex vis-a-vis the special tax district bonds, because at this point that's not happened. It's in progress. And so the MOU has been presented to, as Chris pointed out at the beginning of the call, to plug a gap, meaning, if the bondholders are looking at who's paying for the property, if the town is in line for owning that property and would otherwise not be obligated to pay the taxes because of its status as a public entity, would the town be, if it decides to procure the property, in line for paying those taxes for which there would otherwise be a gap? And so that is what the MOU is covering. I think, as we've all just, discussed here, is, whether the town decides to do that or not has a lot of implications associated with it. It has a lot of decisions associated with it if it proceeds with the Sportsplex. But I guess what I'm, hearing and trying to understand vis-a-vis the MOU and discuss with the town is this a hole that the town would feel comfortable agreeing to plug if it decides to proceed? Because, and again, the Southfield Special Tax District component or separate transaction does have to answer that question. So, but what that introduced when answering that question is a lot of other questions around whether that's going to be how this transaction is, the Sportsplex transaction is structured or not. Do folks kind of am I
Kimberly,
describing the two pieces?
yeah, so if the town of Elkton, if this board signs the MOU agreeing that we are looking at moving forward with this project, then we are responsible for the special taxes on that site. We recognize that. Could we do a separate agreement with Sideline Sports that they would pay the special taxing district costs along with this agreement?
Well, so right now, while they're the owner, they will be paying for them because they're a part of the special taxing district. The agreement that you're suggesting, at least I'm imagining, would be included as a component of the management agreement, included as a component of the term sheet that Chris Sheehan is putting together, because that obligation by Sideline to the town to cover those taxes as part of the operations or, or in some other form of obligation would take place at the time the town were to purchase the land and enter into this management agreement. I don't hear that the town is being asked to buy the land right now or agree to purchase it right now, which would immediately put it in the position of paying for the special taxes. It is the town signing a contingent obligation that if it obtains it, it will pay the taxes. And so then the town can turn around and say to Sideline, as part of the management agreement / term sheet, okay, well, this is part of what needs to be assumed because the town doesn't intend to separately pay for these special taxes. And they expect them to be covered by the sport.
Let's scratch that a little bit, Kimberly. Just because we're all together and
yeah,
it's a useful exercise. And Chris, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here just a bit, so I apologize in advance. But in your view, how critical is the sports park and its funding in some way, shape, or form by the town / county / the development team? How critical is the sports park to the marketing of the special taxing district bonds? I mean, in signing the MOU and assuming that the town would be responsible for paying the taxes going forward, while the MOU itself does not bind the town in terms of creating and funding a sports park, it's sort of enmeshed within the marketing and the overall plan of the special taxing district that a sports park will be built. So the town is sort of indirectly being strongly suggested that this project is going to move forward if the town were to decide, or if the disclosure document were to leave open the possibility that the park never gets developed. What does that do to the marketing of the special taxing district bonds?
So thanks, Joe. Great questions. So let me just be very clear with respect to the disclosure. I envision kind of, referencing this MOU and then adding, specific language that very clearly, would lead the reader to understand that at no point is the town moving forward at this point on a sports park. So let me back that up. But I think, with respect to marketing of the special taxing district bonds, there's certainly great energy from the sports park with respect to driving people to the site. So, whether it's done privately or done publicly, we certainly plan to, market that component of the, of that use within the overall district. There's obviously implications if the town's, building and financing it versus being done privately. But, from an overall marketing standpoint, I see great energy of the sports park to adding, tremendous value to the taxable property values within the district. I mean, as Mike mentioned, 250,000 people on the site, unlocks retail, it unlocks other uses such as hotels, all of which, will create demand for playmaking and drive demand for residential housing. The Trammell Crow buildings are the first anchor, in terms of, providing new jobs. But I think, creating the energy and synergy comes from, a lot of it will come from the sports park, driving people to the retail, driving them to the other residential, driving them to the RV, driving them to the office. So from a marketing standpoint, I believe that, telling the story of what the sports park can do, regardless of its ownership, will be critical to, the overall marketing.
Thank you.
So this is Kimberly, Chris, because I know that the disclosure document is, kind of still in the works for the special taxing district. And for the benefit of the town, the disclosure document is what will describe to the market what the structure of the special tax district transaction is, including what its components are, and would presumably, as Chris said, describe that there would be a sportsplex there. The tie that that kind of kicked off this conversation is that does the execution of this MOU somehow backdoor a town's obligation to assist the sportsplex, and help to make it happen in a way that the town may not necessarily be yet prepared, to commit. And so that's around, well, what are you telling the market? And if the market is going to be clearly told, despite the energy around the existence of a sportsplex, what the town's current obligation on that is, which right now is preliminary as to discussions, then, are we, is that, Chris, is that going to impair the marketing of the special tax district bonds? Do they work without the sportsplex? Is that going to be a component of the feasibility information that's provided? I just think that that'll be an important, an important understanding to have, knowing that we're, still midst documentation on the special tax district deal, and that the town is now going to be, starting to consider the terms of the other component or the other transaction, which is the sportsplex itself.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Kimberly. I think we just need to get the disclosure document and really look at the once we can look at the language, we can then massage it to make sure that, we're not leading the reader in the wrong way and we're not obligating the town in any way. I mean, I think it needs to be as of what the disclosure needs to look like is as of the date that it's final, which likely will be that Sideline is developing the property. They, have assembled the parcels. They put together a plan. They have construction budgets. They have renderings. They have a feasibility study. And then I think we just need to, my concern is that there has been a number of public meetings that have referenced the town and the sports park. And what I don't want to do is have investors be spooked about losing, about those special taxes being extinguished in the event the town, if under the hypothetical scenario, the town did move forward under a bond structure with them owning the asset. I'm just trying to get ahead of that bell curve. And certainly, I think we just need to be very clear in our language that, we're not leading the reader down the wrong path, and we're not putting the town in any position that it isn't ready to put itself into. It's purely just a disclosure item that I can see being questions from potential investors down the road.
I mean, this is Joe again. I personally think it's fine to include it in the disclosure document. To me, the critical language is that proviso that the town is not obligated to proceed. Because if I'm operating under the assumption that the special taxing bonds are going to go to market before whatever borrowing the town might undertake.
Absolutely, Joe. 100% on the same page. 100% on the same page.
I don't want the town to, if they discover down the road that this is not financially feasible, or it's too big and their contribution is more than they can handle, and they want to delay it or, save up some money for a few years, or, whatever the case may be. I don't want. Our job as a fiduciary to the town is to make sure that their interests are protected, and I think you hear what I'm saying.
No, we're completely on the same page, Joe. I couldn't have said it better.
I believe we can get that side of it worked out. Mike, you're going to provide to us the documentation. I think Chris is going to be working on that to bring to the table and let us all look at it, right?
And we'll have at least a skeleton document put together for the qualified management agreement. My understanding is they're very comprehensive. So before we put a whole lot of effort into the language and details, if it's okay, we'll start with kind of what the summary would look like, how it would take place, and then we'll work from there. Our biggest point today was to figure out if the town was willing to move forward, how we're going to move forward. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all of your expertise in it as well. But I also want you to know that we are still investigating other options as we go along. This is a team effort. So as we continue to talk to Medco and opportunities, as we continue to look at options for the building in the center, we're doing this as a group and together. We just didn't want to put any more money into doing qualified management agreements with attorneys firms if we didn't think this was going to be something that's a reality. So what I'm hearing from you is that it is a reality that we're going to move forward in some way, that we just have to figure out what that way would be.
I would say what's fair is that I'm willing to take a straw poll, but I would say that I know the majority, if not unanimously, is in favor of moving forward.
And that's all we need.
And I could say that. Can I say that? We got some heads nodding. You want to make a comment or not make a comment?
No. I don't want to step over top to all the financial people because I'm not in that field, but I was under the impression that we got this far through mutual agreement and not trying to step on my legal counsel because when they say the town is not responsible for any debt whatsoever to this project, I thought this MOU kind of stepped in the way. And it just seemed like it was bringing us right back to the beginning again. But as far as selling the bonds and all that stuff, I don't know all that stuff. But I thought we already got through the special taxing district part of it and everything. Now we're right back to it. So
Commissioner, I'd like to clarify. The town is not obligated for the special obligation bond.
Okay.
That we're not obligated on it. What they're talking about, the obligation would be under general obligation bonds. They're a separate type of bond for the South Sideline Sports thing. But the Southfield at Elkton Capital Development project for the homes and the hotels and everything under special, we're not responsible. They're sold as special obligation bonds.
all right.
Go into.
I'm not saying it in a negative way. It's just that what I'm hearing is I just want to say that I'm all for the project. It's just that moving forward is I'm all for moving forward. It's just that I'm hoping that we got to this point. It's not my money, but some people have already have things built and put in place, the structures there, and then it seems like we're at a standing point. Are we going to be moving forward with this project while we're waiting for this to be developed? I mean, as far as the agreements, this is not putting us at a standstill right now with the project, is it? That's the question I'm asking.
I think right now what you're asking is accurate. We're actually moving forward as of today because we've heard that you all want to move forward. That's where as everyone makes the comments. Our biggest concern was starting to put together documents and agreements for your consideration that are against the grain of what you're thinking. So I know we've been in a lot of different formats while we've discussed this, but not with your legal counsel and not with your financial advisor. So I think that this is kind of putting all the cards on the table, saying, okay, we understand what our exposure is. We're going to at least start to continue moving forward with the documents of the preparation. Certainly no obligation right now, but if we're not saying no right now, then we're going to continue to move forward with putting some more documents together for your consideration, including the debt repayment sheet and the and what Chris is going to put together. Thank you.
Bob, you got a comment?
Well, I've been behind this project from the beginning. I realize there are risks. I think we all realize that there are risks, but the way that it has been planned and developed and presented to us, it seems like the risks are minimal. It's almost foolproof. And the rewards are going to be great for generations to come. So yeah, not only do I want to move forward with it, I want to expedite it a bit. Let's get this going. There's my feelings.
Thank you.
Charles, any comment?
Yeah, we've discussed in length the project, and I think most people on the board, and I don't speak on behalf of myself, I think we were moving smoothly, sailing, but all of a sudden, today we hit somewhat of a bump. We talked about the risk, we talked about the bond sale, we talked about the rating agency, we talked about Joe's 4 criteria that the rating agency also look at. We've talked about a number of things. I still like to move forward, seeing what will be put together, because we had a lot of language spoken today. We've had a lot of people spoken today. And if we're going to move forward, I would like to see that language put together so my understanding will still be simplified. Because it was shadowed somewhat today, hearing a lot of people. I understand what was being said, but you know, when you got people coming at you every direction, you've got to throw all those things together right now. That needs to be done.
Thank you, Charles. Gene, any comment?
Well, that was well said, Charlie.
It was very well said.
Thank you. No, I actually have always supported the project and hopefully will continue to support this project, no question. But what I heard from Kimberly and Joe today was invaluable to me. And that you're looking out for our best interests, of course, and that everybody's going to work together to see what we can come up with. I'm excited to see what we do come up with. Absolutely. Yeah, and I do want to thank Kimberly and Joe for the information you brought forward to me or to us today. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this is a workshop. Is there anyone online that would like to say anything or not say anything, good or bad, or additional information that could help along this project? None? Anyone in the audience today?
I have a question.
Yes.
Mayor,
For our local teams, like our Little League and junior football and everything, is there going to be a cost to those teams to use the sports complex?
No,
No?
we actually reached out to all the little leagues around the county and other sports teams, the nonprofit sports teams, and offered it to them. Many of them declined. At this point, I hope that they reconsider once it's developed. In fact, Mondays through Thursdays on the fields, we actually were encouraging them to come and use our sports complex, because the majority of the revenue that would be seen from the tournaments would be on the weekends. So we've started those discussions a few years ago, and we'll continue. But if you're speaking to anyone, please let them know. Our intent is to make this a community centerpiece and not an exclusion.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I think we gained a lot here today. There's a lot of information, a couple of things. I'm going to kind of wrap it up. Christine is going to put together the framework for us all to review and make comments on. We know that the worst scenario is 3.2 to $3.3 million cost to the town of Elkton. That's if we own a beautiful spine building with all this retail into it, and I don't know how many 40 acres of sports fields. That's the worst scenario that we have, and it doesn't bring in $1. But we'd have a.
And Mike and Brad will be homeless, by the way.
That's right. We'd have and then I also recognize that in the agreement that you guys would commit to some type of pilot agreement that would be paying in lieu of taxes all these special taxing fees, right? And the intent is that you're going to pay every dollar of the bonds back.
Quickly, more quickly than the bond.
Okay, I think that's very important in the framework. That's where we're going.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments? Yes,
I appreciate everybody's input today.
Appreciate everyone for coming. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate this.
Thank
you.
take care.
The 10 o'clock meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys for coming.